My son tried to have me declared incompetent and even loosened the gas line under my grandchildren's rooms. By Tuesday, the judge handed me back my house and the company. He never noticed the pen he used to save himself was mine, and it signed his own confession. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. I am 71 years old, a grandfather of 4, and I have spent 50 of those years building Cole and Harrow, a small-town commercial glass company that grew into the outfit every bank and hospital within 100 miles still calls first. That company gave my family a comfortable life, a farmhouse with a wraparound porch, a lake cottage with a leaky screen door we never got around to fixing, braces and softball fees, first cars, college tuition, Christmases that made the neighbors shake their heads and smile. It also taught me to keep receipts, read every line, and never sign anything I had not already read twice. Those habits saved me, and my grandchildren, from my son. His name is Aaron. He is 42, handsome in a way that made his teachers forgive what they should have corrected, and quick with a compliment that made waitresses forget he didn't tip. As a boy he was the prince of every church potluck, the first one picked for Little League, the kid every other parent wanted their son to befriend and their daughter to date. He was also the only person I ever raised my voice at in the middle of the night. He was 17 and a month away from graduation when I found him in the shop office filling out a credit application in my name. It was on a Saturday, the office smelled like dust and coffee, and there he was, my boy, my namesake, hand shaking while he tried to copy my signature from an old invoice. I took the pen out of his fingers, turned off the light, and walked him home without a word. In the kitchen, with his mother listening, I told him a story about my father, how a single bad signature forced him to sell his truck and swallow his pride. Then I made Aaron call the bank and confess. He cried. He promised it would never happen again. I believed him because I wanted to. If love is blind, a grandchild is corrective eyewear. When my first granddaughter, June, wrapped her fist around my finger, I learned to see again, what was worthy of my patience and what was taking advantage of it. My wife, Caroline, died 3 winters ago. The morning after her funeral, I stood in the mudroom holding the cardigan she had left draped over the bench and realized the house had become an airport hangar, huge and empty and too quiet. For a month I ate soup and didn't taste it. For 3, I went to work at 5 and left at 7 because I could not bear the late afternoon light on the kitchen tile where she had always stood. It was Aaron who stepped into that light first. "Dad," he said one Tuesday, standing at the counter like a man doing the brave thing, "I think we should talk about transitions." He had a folder. Of course he did. Blue pressboard, tab labeled strategic plan in a tidy printing that was not his. A woman's hand. His wife's, I thought. The folder had tabs and a sheet on top that managed to say the word legacy 3 times without mentioning responsibility even once. "It is time," he said, "to think about what is best for the family." I took a slow sip of coffee and set the mug down on the exact ring that mug had made yesterday. "For the family," I repeated. He talked for 20 minutes about modernizing the company, leveraging assets, unwinding liabilities that were, in his words, emotionally driven. When he said the word house, his voice went careful and soft the way people talk to skittish dogs. He suggested, no, he urged, that I list it and move to something manageable. Maybe a condo in town. He had a great agent. The market was hot. He did not mention June or Eli or Maya or little Toby, his own children, for whom this house was summer sprinklers and Christmas stockings and the place they learned to shoot rubber bands with forbidden skill. He did not mention Caroline's lemon bars or the growth chart on the pantry wall where a dozen pencil lines marked height and time like notches on a faith that you do not sell. "Make your ask," I said calmly. He looked startled. When a man brings a folder, he has a number in his head. Make your ask. He named one, and it did not match the number I had in mine. After he left, I drove to the cemetery and spoke to the woman whose picture I was not ready to take off the mantle. I told her what he had said. I told her about the folder, about the phrases misshapen by consultant mouths. I said the word legacy and watched a leaf detach from the oak above her. I made a decision right there at her headstone, the way I used to make decisions at her side while she stirred something that made the whole house smell like home. By Friday, I had met with my attorney, a woman named Rivera whose handshake is warmer than her eyes, and by Monday, the company and the house, this house, with Caroline's laugh in the stairs and my grandchildren's Legos under the couch, sat in a Cole family trust, governed by a document 3/4 as long as the Old Testament. It did not disinherit my son. It did something better. It set conditions so clear a child could understand them. You honor family, you do not exploit it, you care for your children and their mother, you do not borrow against what does not belong to you, you do not lie, and if you violate any of this, there are consequences written in black ink. There was a clause, Rivera's idea I accepted with a nod, that said if any beneficiary attempted to influence the settlor, that was me, by undue pressure, misrepresentation, or tinkering with my medical status, their interest converted to a token bequest, $1 and a letter. We called it, quietly and with a small shared smile, the bad actor clause. I told no one about the trust. I simply finished my coffee each morning and drove to the shop like I always had. We made bids. We won some. We lost a few. We got a contract to replace the front of the bank on Maple. I went to my grandson's baseball game, sat with a thermos because the concession stand cocoa tastes like hot water and hope. I held Junie's hand at the fall festival and ate kettle corn I told my doctor I did not eat. 3 months later, the calls began. Dad, Aaron said, tone bright and thin as aluminum, how about I take point on your annual physical this year? I found a cognitive screening that's quick, and Dr. S. says it is standard for people your age. I laughed, out loud and alone in my truck after I hung up. I made my own appointment with my own doctor and added a neuropsych evaluation for good measure. I had them notarize the results. 2 weeks after that, my shop foreman, a man named Hubbard who can hang tempered glass in a windstorm without cursing, walked into my office and closed the door. We've got a problem, he said, then set a stack of paper on my desk. Purchase orders. Change orders. All with a signature that looked like mine if my hand were drunk. They're backdating materials and swapping suppliers, he said. Cheaper glass. Looks right until it does not. He swallowed. The authorizations came from your son. I heard Caroline say my name, Mark, in that tone she used when I was about to do something the kids would call epic and she would call foolish. I took the papers and thanked Hubbard and told him to change nothing for 72 hours. Then I checked the security logs. My office safe is not a movie safe. It is not hidden behind a painting. It squats in the corner like a stubborn bulldog and opens with a simple code. Not 1974 or 1234 or anyone's birthday. 11 numbers only I know. It had not been opened. The file cabinet that only looks unlocked had not been disturbed. But the shop Wi-Fi had a new device attached late Thursday night. It was a little plug they sell for $20, you insert it into an outlet and it makes your office a radio. Anything on your network can be observed if the man outside in a silver SUV has read the instructions. And the man in a silver SUV had. I drove to the lake cottage the next morning because grief has paths it walks on and mine leads there when I cannot get my breath. I unlocked the door and stood in the sun-swept dust of a place that smelled like sunscreen and fish, and then I saw the fold in the curtain. The latch on the back door was fresh scratched metal. The old safe beside the dresser had a hairline streak of graphite near the dial. My heart did not thud. It slowed. I took the lid off a cookie tin on the top shelf where Caroline used to hide chocolate from herself and pulled out the key for the cedar trunk under the bed. In the trunk, in an envelope, lay copies of everything I had moved to the trust and the letter Rivera had written with language so clean you could shave with it. I took a photo of each page. Then I set the envelope back and placed a small camera, one of those that looks like a phone charger, in the outlet behind the trunk because sometimes men cannot resist what is not theirs. On the way home I called Rivera. "It is time," I said. She made 3 calls I did not hear. She filed something called an ex parte notice with the county clerk that I did not fully understand, and she sent me a document she called a shoebox letter. Everything that needed to be triggered would trigger if anything happened to me. That night, we found the gas line. My granddaughter Maya had a cough. She and June and Eli and little Toby were here because their mother, Hannah, was in a hotel after telling Erin she wanted a week without fights and speeches. That night I made spaghetti, and Junie said, "Grandpa, something smells funny," and I said, "That is because I burned the sauce," but I knew the smell by the time we hit the stairs, faint metal, like a coin, only colder. Hubbard came with 2 guys and flashlights, and in the glow of their beams I saw the tape peeled back from the connector, the wrench marks on the fixture, the small, deliberate wrongness of it. Not a loose connection. A loosened one. I sent the children down the back steps to the backyard where the air smelled like wet leaves and safety. I looked at the wall where Caroline's portrait hung and whispered a word I have not used since the war. Then, while the house opened its lungs to the night air, I did what men who have seen their boy go wrong sometimes must do. I called the sheriff. We made hot chocolate on the grill and told ghost stories while the house cleared and the deputy walked through with a small detector that chirped and then settled. I put the children to bed in the playroom where it still smells like crayons. I sat in the dark downstairs with a baseball bat across my knees because I am old but not fragile and some nights call for theater. At 2 in the morning, a silver SUV drifted past the house, parked 2 doors down, and then crept back, cutting its lights as if it could disappear in its own shadow. The camera over the back steps sent my phone a chime that did not sound like any other. It was not Aaron at the back door. It was a man I had seen only twice, once across a poker table at a fundraiser where he bragged about expediting paperwork, and once in the reflection of my office window when Aaron thought I had left early. He wore gloves and a hat and a smile meant for someone else's victory. He bent to the lock. He was quiet. Efficient. He moved like a man who had never met a bolt he could not sweet-talk. He had the door open in under a minute. He stepped inside, looked up at the camera, and waved. Then he froze because he heard the click. It was not a shotgun click. It was not a movie click. It was the click of a deadbolt sliding back into place from the control panel on the wall because Rivera's nephew knows how to rig a door so a man can walk in but not out. The deputy stepped out of the dining room and said very politely, "Good morning, sir." Badge on the table. Hands where I can see them. Another deputy took the man's bag. They laid the tools out like a still life, pliers, a pick set, a little canister that looked like breath spray but would have turned my smoke detectors into decorative ceiling art. The man said a name. He said it too quickly, like a child says a lie when the light turns on. He said my son's name. At 9, while the children watched cartoons and ate pancakes the shape of animals that alarmed them, the sheriff stood in my kitchen and used phrases like probable cause and ongoing inquiry. I nodded. I called Hannah at the hotel and asked her to come for lunch. She did. She stepped into the kitchen with sunglasses on and a small suitcase. She looked like a woman who had just run a marathon she had not trained for. I made her an egg sandwich and tea. I asked her 2 questions. She answered both with tears and the kind of relief that looks like shame until it remembers its own backbone. At noon, Aaron arrived. He did not knock. He never has. He walked into my kitchen past the sheriff he did not see and said, "Dad, we need to talk," and then he saw the badge and the hand at a holster and swallowed the rest of his sentence. "Are you all right?" he asked, eyes darting, mouth dry. "Better than you," I said. Rivera arrived with her leather bag and eyes like winter. She had a document in her hand and a pen in the other. "Before we go to court," she said to Aaron, "I want you to hear this from your father." I said nothing for a long moment. Caroline would have talked softly here. She would have reminded me that this is the boy who broke his arm jumping from the porch because he believed he could fly. I am not Caroline. I put my palm on the kitchen island I built with her and let the wood remind me of what lasts. "You tried to move my house and my business like they are chess pieces you own," I said. "You called a doctor I have never met to schedule a test I do not need so you could ask a judge who has never seen me to take my decisions away. You ran cheap glass under a good man's name. You loosened a gas line in the house where your children sleep." My voice broke on that last sentence because there are places even a father's anger cannot go without injury. He started to speak. Rivera lifted a finger. He closed his mouth. "What happens now," I said, "is not revenge. It is the structure you need and the safety my grandchildren must have." Rivera read from the trust. "Upon a showing of undue influence, fraud, or unethical leverage aimed at the settler's person or property," she read, "the interest of the offending beneficiary is reduced to a nominal distribution and the trustees, that would be Rivera and Hubbard and Hannah's sister, Anna, shall, at their discretion, use what would have been that interest solely for the benefit of the minor children." She set the document down like a judge sets a gavel. "In addition," she said, "the operating agreement for Cole and Harrow has been amended. It gives the founder, your father, the immediate power to remove any manager for cause, including financial misconduct. The board will meet at 3. You will not be there." His face went gray. He reached for the folder he always brings when he thinks paper can save him. Then he saw the sheriff and understood paper would not do the work for him. At 2, we stood in front of Judge Holcomb. The courtroom smelled like old wood and breath mints. Aaron's lawyer, paid for, I later learned, with a check drawn on a company account, made a speech about concern for an aging parent. Rivera handed the judge the neuropsych evaluation, the notarized letter from my doctor, the recorded footage of a stranger in my back hallway whispering my son's name, and the digital audit trail of purchase orders that changed when my office was dark. The judge took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers. "I see," he said. He denied the guardianship petition. He granted a temporary protective order that kept Aaron away from my house, the shop, and his children until a family court could decide how a father who had loosened a gas line should see them safely. He told Rivera that he appreciated the clarity of her papers. He told me that it is never easy to be a father. Then he told Aaron to take a seat because the sheriff had questions about a man with a tool roll and an odd sense of entitlement. When it was over, we walked out into the bright indifferent daylight, and my son, my boy, stood on the courthouse steps with his lawyer's hand on his elbow and looked at me like he wanted to be 7 again. "Dad," he said. "Please." I wanted to hug him. I wanted to crack open the top of his head and pour the boy he had been back into him. What I did was put my hand on his shoulder, squeeze it once, and say, "I am still your father. I will help you be a man. But I will not protect your bad choices from their consequences. Call your sponsor. Call a pastor. Call a mirror." He looked at Hannah, not at me, and found no permission. She had her shoulders back in a way that told me she was done asking for less than the whole truth. The board met at 3. Hubbard sat where he never thought he would sit and spoke the way a man speaks when he knows his voice matters. We removed Aaron from any role that required a signature. We set controls I should have set when I thought love was protection. We gave raises to the 2 women in accounts payable who smelled something wrong and were brave enough to walk into my office with it. That night, I took the grandkids to the lake cottage. I changed the screen in the door before they could ask about the rip. We made esmores that dripped onto shirt fronts, and I did not scold. Junie and I sat on the end of the dock and counted the stars. Eli told me he wants to build something that floats but moves on land. Maya asked me if bad people always look like good people at first. I told her no. I told her sometimes good people make bad choices and then keep making them because they cannot stand to say, "I was wrong." We prayed for Aaron while fireflies blinked like a Morse code I have forgotten. Later, when 3 of the 4 were asleep and Maya was drawing very seriously with her tongue poked between her teeth, I wrote a letter. It was to my grandchildren. I told them about the house and the company and the way their grandmother could make a pie crust without measuring. I told them about responsibility and how it is more freeing than it looks. I told them that gifts are not free, they come with expectations, but those expectations are love in clothing. The next morning, on the porch that still had one loose board because Caroline said the creek sounded like home, I called a family meeting. Hannah sat on the steps with a mug wrapped in both hands. My daughter, Ruth, from my first marriage, long-heeled and stronger than she knows, drove over from Cedar Falls and brought cinnamon rolls that tasted like apologies that had finally been accepted. I told them my plan. We would keep the house. We would keep the company. We would place the lake cottage in a subtrust for the grandchildren with rules that would make them grown when they were 15 and grateful when they were 30, keep it, maintain it, share it, no selling without unanimous consent in a letter from me that I had written 3 years ago and tucked into Rivera's safe. We would appoint a family council, myself, Hannah, and Ruth, for a year, and then we would add Junie when she turned 13 because she sees things the rest of us do not. We would fund college for the children with money that had been earmarked for my son's share, but we would do it as a match. Every dollar they earned mowing lawns or stacking boxes at the shop would be matched by 2. We would make Sunday dinners non-negotiable and phones on the piano during dinner like a church offering. We would invite Aaron when the court allowed, and we would let him bring only himself and whatever sincerity he could afford that night. We would not let him bring a story that turned our generosity into his right. When I finished talking, Maya put her drawing in my lap. It was of a house with a porch and stick figures on the steps. There was a dog, even though we do not have one because Caroline was allergic. Underneath, she had written in her careful new letters, "Our home, our rules, our love." In the weeks that followed, Aaron spiraled and then steadied. He called his sponsor. He went to meetings in a church basement that smelled like coffee and cleaning solution. He worked for a month at a warehouse where no one knew his last name. He sent short, honest texts. He stood in front of a judge in a room with carpet that made your feet whisper and agreed to what men who want to be better agree to: counseling, repair, time not as a sentence but as a tool. He sent me a letter, not typed, not dictated, written in the boyish hand he had when he used to sign his birthday cards with a backward N. It said, "Dad, I am ashamed. I am grateful. I am trying. It was 3 lines. It was more than the blue folder had ever contained. I did not trust him yet. Trust is not a light switch. It is a ladder. He could climb it, I would not lift him. At the shop, work went on. We replaced the front of the bank on Maple, and I watched the glass slide into the frame like a truth taking its rightful place. Hubbard trained a kid who reminds me of Aaron at 17, the same swagger trying to hide an ache. We hired another woman in accounts payable because women who smell wrongness deserve company. On a Saturday in October, the first frost painted the lawn where my grandchildren play. I stood on the porch with a sweater I would not have worn when Caroline was alive because she would have told me it was time to surrender to the practical coat. Hannah came up behind me with coffee. We listened to the children race the length of the yard and lie in the grass pretending to make snow angels in the frost. I thought about legacy and responsibility and the sweet, stubborn mercy of second chances that do not remove the guardrails. Later that afternoon, Aaron's car turned into the drive. He sat in it for a long moment like a man sitting in church who is not sure if he is ready to walk forward. He got out. He did not come onto the porch. He stood at the bottom of the steps like he understood what even the dog in Maya's drawing knew: you pause before entering what you have tried to take. "Dad," he said. "Son," I answered. He swallowed. His eyes were clear for the first time in months. "I brought back your pen," he said. It was the pen Rivera had handed him in my kitchen the day he signed the acknowledgement that he had attempted to exploit me and that he understood the consequences. It is a heavy pen, silver, with a small nick on the barrel where it hit the shop floor one afternoon when Caroline called me to say Eli was being born and I forgot how to hold things. I took the pen. I put it in my breast pocket. I asked him if he was hungry. He said yes. We sat at the table with the children who talked over each other and the adults who did not correct their joy. After dinner, while the house hummed with dishes and football and a piano that does not stay in tune, I stood and cleared my throat. The room settled in that way a family room does when the father, finally remembering he is the father, has something to say. "This is my house," I said. "It is your home as long as you treat it like one. The company pays the bills because we have worked for it, we will keep working. The cottage stays because your grandmother loved it, we will protect it. The children will be raised with kindness and limits. The adults will be held accountable. We will forgive, but we will not forget the lessons. We will love, but we will not fund our own undoing." I looked at Aaron. He did not look away. He nodded once, and in that nod I saw the boy who once stole my razor to scrape at the idea of being a man. The grandchildren do not know the word legacy. They know the taste of pancakes and the sound of a door that creaks and the surety of a hand that will take theirs when they cross a street. That is enough for now. But one day, when they are men and women who sign their own names to documents that matter, I hope they remember my kitchen table that October, the way the light slanted across the wood, the way their father returned a pen, and the way their grandfather, an old man who had once almost lost everything, stood up, not to punish, but to lead. We kept the house. We kept the company. We kept the children safe. And we kept one more thing I had almost forgotten how to keep, our future. People ask what revenge feels like when it arrives by the book instead of the fist. I tell them the truth. Revenge is not the right word for what I did. I drew a line so straight even a frightened man could see it in the dark. I signed my name with a pen that had been lost and was now found. I watched my son choose to walk toward the light instead of the quick shadow. And I slept, finally, in a house that smelled not of gas, but of lemon oil and cinnamon, while my grandchildren breathed softly upstairs, not fearing, not wanting, knowing that the leader of their family had made the rules and would keep them. That is not revenge. That is justice made warm. That is the long return home.
Greetings, and thanks for spending your time with us today. I truly hope you enjoyed the video. I want to wish you a peaceful day or a restful evening, wherever you may be. Take care, and we'll see you next time.